The stable door was already shut when Eli Mercer stepped inside, and for one hard second, it looked like he was the reason it had been closed. The air inside was thick with heat and the sharp smell of hay. Light slipped through the cracks in the wooden boards and cut across the dirt floor in thin gold lines. In the far corner, on a pile of old straw, a young girl sat with her knees pulled tight to her chest. She wore a torn shirt that hung loose from one shoulder and barely reached her thighs. Her legs were bare, marked with bruises in shades of yellow and dark purple that had not yet faded. When Eli's shadow crossed over her, she flinched as if she expected the next blow to come from him. Eli stopped where he was. He removed his hat slowly and held it against his chest. He did not speak right away, and his eyes moved around the stall instead. He saw the iron ring bolted into the wall. He saw the short length of chain lying in the straw. He saw the latch on the outside of the door and knew at once it had been fastened from beyond the stable. Then he saw her wrists. Red marks circled them, rubbed raw. The girl swallowed hard. Her lips trembled, but she forced the words out in a cracked whisper. "My father. 3 times a day." Her eyes shifted toward a wooden post beside her. Eli followed her gaze. Carved into the post were 3 shallow cuts, clean and even. Not wild scratches, not careless marks. 3 straight lines. Morning, midday, night. She did not cry. That was what struck him most. There were no tears left in her eyes, only a quiet waiting. "He drinks," she said softly. Then he locks the door." Eli felt something move deep in his chest. It was not just anger. It was shame. He had known Silas Whitfield for years, a small horse trader who spent too much time at the Long Branch Saloon in Dodge City, a man who laughed loud when he won at cards and blamed others when he lost. Silas had once told Eli that his daughter was sickly and hard to manage. Folks in town had whispered that Silas owed money and that a piece of land in his daughter's name might help clear his debts. What Eli saw in that stall was not sickness. It was control. The girl's name was Clara Whitfield. She was 18, old enough to speak for herself. But in Ford County, a father's word still carried heavy weight, and daughters were expected to obey without question. Clara watched Eli the way a trapped animal watches a man holding a rope, waiting to see which side he stood on. Outside, boots crunched on gravel. Silas Whitfield was coming back from the well. Eli's mind worked fast. If he walked away now, Clara would count 3 more marks before the sun went down. If he stepped between father and daughter, he would step into trouble. The law in Dodge City did not always favor girls over fathers. Eli had once watched a drunk man break his own home apart. He had stayed quiet then. He had told himself it was not his business. He had hated himself for that silence ever since. He was not about to do it again. Silas stopped short when he saw Eli standing by the stable door. He set his bucket down slowly and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He smiled, but the smile did not touch his eyes. "She gets dramatic in the heat," Silas said lightly. "Girl's got a wild streak." Eli did not answer at once. He stepped just enough to block Silas's view into the stall. "She's locked in," Eli said calmly. Silas shrugged as if it meant nothing. "She runs off. I keep her close. That's called raising a child." Clara stayed still behind him. She did not speak. She did not defend herself. She only watched. Eli had come to buy a bay gelding. Instead, he had found this. "I'll take the gelding," Eli said steady, "and I'll hire her for the drive back to my ranch. I need help. I'll pay fair." Silas's smile faded. "She ain't for hire. She ain't livestock either," Eli replied. The words hung heavy between them. Silas moved first. No warning, just a fist flying fast with the sour smell of whiskey on his breath. And the punch hit Eli's shoulder. A second swing followed, wild and angry, but Eli caught him by the shirt and drove him back into the stable wall. The boards shook. A horse kicked inside its stall. Dust rose into the hot air. Silas fought like a cornered animal. Eli fought steady. One hard hit to the ribs, one shove that sent Silas stumbling into a feed barrel. Clara moved then. She grabbed a handful of straw and threw it into her father's face. It was not brave in the way stories often tell. It was desperate, but it was enough. Eli reached for the key hanging on a nail by the door. He unlocked the stall and stepped between Silas and the girl. "If I hear you laid a hand on her again," Eli said low and firm, "I'll come back with the law, and I won't come alone." Minutes later, Eli's wagon rolled away from the Whitfield place. Clara sat beside him, wrapped in an old canvas coat he kept behind the seat. She stared straight ahead and did not look back. Behind them, Silas stood in the yard, his lip bleeding, his eyes cold and sharp. He was not thinking about fists anymore. He was thinking about the law. The wagon wheels ground over the dirt road as they left Dodge City behind. The Arkansas River shimmered under the afternoon sun as they crossed at a shallow bend. Eli did not press Clara with questions. He handed her a tin cup of water and let silence sit between them. "You're safe here," he told her when his ranch finally came into view. She nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the horizon as if she still expected someone to come riding after them. That first evening, when the sun began to sink and shadows stretched long across the yard, Clara stiffened. Eli noticed the way her shoulders tightened. He knew it was one of the hours she had carved into that post. Morning, midday, night. Instead of speaking about it, Eli handed her a bucket and asked her to help feed the horses. They moved from stall to stall together. The simple work filled the space. The moment passed without a locked door, without heavy boots stepping toward her. When the sky darkened and nothing happened, something small shifted inside her. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the start of it. The next morning, Eli rode into Dodge City and stepped into the sheriff's office. Tom Callahan sat behind his desk with his boots resting on top, hat tipped back. He listened as Eli spoke. He did not interrupt. "Locked stall," Eli said. "Marks on her wrists. 3 times a day." Tom rubbed his jaw slowly. "You stepped into something," he said at last. "I know." Tom leaned forward. "Silas filed a complaint this morning. Says you kidnapped his daughter." The words settled heavy in the room. "In this county," Tom added carefully, "a father still carries weight." Eli understood what he meant. Blood often spoke louder than bruises. When Eli returned to the ranch that afternoon, Clara stood by the fence watching the road. She must have felt it before he saw it. Just before sunset, she spoke without turning around. "He won't stop," she whispered. Eli followed her gaze. Far down the road that led from Dodge City, a thin line of dust was rising into the summer sky. The line of dust grew thicker as it moved closer, rising slow and steady against the pale Kansas sky. Clara did not run. She did not hide. Well, she simply stood there, with her hands resting on the fence rail, her face calm, in a way that did not match the fear sitting deep in her eyes. Eli stepped forward until he stood slightly in front of her. He counted 3 riders. Silas rode in front. 2 men followed behind him, both from town. The kind who spent more time leaning against saloon walls than mending fences. Their hats were pulled low, their faces hard. No badge in sight. The riders pulled up sharp in the yard. Dust rolled past them and settled around the porch steps. "You got something that belongs to me," Silas called out. His voice was loud, but there was something tight under it, something that did not sound fully sure. "She ain't something," Eli answered, steady and calm. One of the men spat into the dirt. "This don't need to turn ugly," he said, though his hand rested close to his belt. Clara stepped out onto the porch behind Eli. She stayed close, but she did not hide behind him. That mattered. Silas saw it. For a brief moment, his face changed. Not anger, not fear. Control slipping. "You think he'll keep you?" Silas snapped at her. "You think this rancher wants your trouble?" Clara did not answer. Her hands tightened into fists at her sides. Eli kept his eyes on Silas. "You filed a complaint. Sheriff knows where she is. We can ride into Dodge City and settle this the right way." Silas gave a short laugh that held no humor. Settle it here," he said, and swung down from his horse. It happened fast. Silas shoved Eli hard in the chest. One of the other men tried to step around toward the porch. Eli moved before the man could reach the steps. He drove his shoulder into Silas, knocking him back into the dirt. The two men circled, but neither drew a gun. This was not about bullets yet. It was about pride. Silas swung wild. His fist caught Eli along the jaw. Eli staggered once, then steadied. He answered with one clean punch that split Silas's lip. Blood ran down into the dust. Clara's voice cut through the air. "Stop!" It was not a scream. It was strong, clear. The second man froze when she grabbed a fence post and stepped forward, her chin lifted. There was no chain on her wrist now, no locked door behind her. Silas lay flat on his back, a chest rising fast. He stared up at the sky for a moment before speaking. "You don't understand," he muttered. Eli stood over him. "Then explain." Silas pushed himself up slowly, wiping blood from his mouth. "She signed it." The words made the yard go still. "Signed what?" Eli asked. Silas's eyes flicked toward Clara. Just for a second. That was all it took. Clara swallowed. "He made me sign something," she said quietly. Now the two hired men shifted where they stood. This was no longer about a runaway daughter. This was about paper, about land. And land in Kansas could turn neighbors into enemies faster than whiskey. Silas climbed back into his saddle. "We'll let the law sort it," he said, voice low and tight. "You want law. You'll get it." The three riders turned and headed back toward Dodge City, a dust rising behind them once more. Clara stood still until they disappeared from sight. Only then did her shoulders drop. "What did he make you sign?" Eli asked gently. She looked down at her hands. "My mother's land, the river piece." Eli felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Land along the Arkansas River was worth more than Silas's horses, more than his house. "How?" Eli asked. "He said if I didn't sign, he'd lock me in there and never let me out," she said. 3 times a day until I did. Her voice did not shake. That scared Eli more than tears would have. The next morning they rode into Dodge City together. The town felt heavier than usual. People watched as they passed. News traveled fast in places like this, faster than horses. Inside the sheriff's office, Tom Callahan stood by his desk. Silas was already there, and his lip was swollen. His pride was not. Tom laid a folded paper on the desk between them. "A transfer of land," Tom said. "From Clara Whitfield to Silas Whitfield." He looked at Clara. "Did you sign this?" "Yes," she answered. "Did you sign it freely?" The room went quiet. Even Silas held his breath. Clara lifted her chin. "No." One word, clear and steady. Silas stepped forward. "She's my daughter. It's family business." Tom's face hardened. A locked stall ain't family business." Silas's jaw tightened. "You going to take a girl's word over her father's?" Tom did not answer right away. He looked at the red marks still faintly visible around Clara's wrists. He looked at Eli standing beside her, not speaking for her, only present. "In this county," Tom said slowly, "a father has rights. But he don't have chains." Silas tried to argue. He spoke about discipline, about disobedience, about a girl who ran wild. Clara did not interrupt. She simply stood there. Tom finally nodded toward one of his deputies. "Take him." Silas's face turned pale for just a moment before anger covered it again. "This ain't over," he said, as they led him away. By sundown, the story had spread from the Long Branch saloon to the church steps. Some folks said Eli had done right. Others muttered that a man had the right to raise his own child. But the paper was set aside for review, and Silas Whitfield sat behind bars for holding his daughter against her will. That night, back at the ranch, Clara stood near the fence again. The sky burned orange and red before fading into deep blue. "It was always at sunset," she said softly. Eli knew what she meant. One of the 3 times. They waited together. The light faded. The wind moved through the grass. No one came. No boots crunched on gravel. No key turned in a lock. Clara let out a slow breath. For the first time since Eli had seen her in that stall, her eyes filled with tears. "I thought no one would ever believe me," she said. Eli rested his forearms on the fence beside her. "Sometimes," he said, "it only takes one person to stand up." She looked at him then, not as a trapped animal watching a rope, but as someone starting to believe the rope had been cut. Still, deep inside, Eli knew this was not finished. Silas was not the kind of man to let go easy, and Dodge City had a way of changing its mind when money and land were involved. Out in the dark, far beyond the ranch lights, and a single rider moved along the road, watching and waiting. The rider did not come through the front gate. He stopped far enough from the ranch house to stay hidden by the dark. Eli saw the shape of horse and man against the faint line of the horizon. He did not reach for his rifle. He simply watched. Clara stood beside him on the porch. She felt it too. That sense of being measured from a distance. "Is it him?" she asked quietly. "No," Eli said after a moment. "Silas is still in a cell." The rider turned his horse slowly and disappeared back down the road. But the message had been sent. This was not over. 2 days later, word came from town. Silas had posted bond. Money had changed hands, and men who owed him favors had spoken up. The land paper was being reviewed, but it was not yet void. There would be a hearing, and the judge riding circuit would decide. Clara listened without blinking. "He'll lie," she said. "Then you tell the truth," Eli answered. On the morning of the hearing, Dodge City filled early. Wagons lined the street, horses tied to every post. The Long Branch saloon was quieter than usual. Even the card tables felt the weight of it. Inside the small courthouse, the air was warm and still. Men removed their hats. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Silas stood on one side of the room in a clean shirt and a stiff coat. The bruise on his lip had faded to yellow. He looked calm, almost confident. Clara stood on the other side with Eli beside her. She wore a simple blue dress Eli's neighbor had given her. The red marks on her wrists had faded, but they were not gone. The judge listened as Silas spoke first. Well, he talked about a stubborn daughter, about discipline, about land meant to stay in the family. He said she had signed freely, that she had been confused and influenced by an outsider. He did not once mention the stall. When it was Clara's turn, the room felt smaller. She stepped forward alone. "Did you sign this paper?" the judge asked. "Yes." "Were you forced?" Clara did not rush her answer. "He locked me in the stable," she said. 3 times a day, morning, midday, night. He kept a chain on the wall. He said I would stay there until I signed. A murmur moved through the room. Silas shifted where he stood. The judge leaned forward. "Why did you not speak sooner?" Clara's voice stayed steady. "Because I was afraid no one would believe me." Silence followed that, heavy and real. Then Eli stepped forward, not to speak over her, but to add what he had seen. He described the iron ring in the wall, the chain in the straw, the 3 marks carved into the post. He did not raise his voice. He did not exaggerate. He simply told the truth. Sheriff Tom Callahan confirmed the red marks on her wrists when he first saw her in town. He confirmed the locked stall. Silas's confidence began to crack. "You got no proof I forced her," Silas said sharply. "She's my daughter." The judge looked at Clara again. "Did you sign because you wanted to give him the land?" "No," she said. One word. Strong. The judge sat back in his chair. "A signature given under threat is no signature at all," he said firmly. "The transfer is void." The room broke into low voices, some relieved, some angry. "And as for the confinement," the judge continued, "this court does not accept chains as discipline." Silas's face drained of color. He was fined heavily and ordered to stay away from Clara. The land remained in her name. For the first time, the law had not chosen blood over truth. Outside the courthouse, Clara stepped into the sunlight and stopped. She looked up at the wide Kansas sky. No stable roof above her, no boards blocking the light. "It's over," Eli said quietly. She shook her head once. "It's starting." Back at the ranch, the days moved slower and steadier. Clara worked beside Eli in the fields. She learned the rhythm of the land, planting, watering, mending fence. The first time sunset came without fear. She did not notice at first. She was laughing at something one of the ranch hands had said. Then she stopped and looked west. The sun dipped low. No locked door, no boots in gravel, no key turning. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not from pain. Weeks passed. One afternoon, a letter arrived from a lawyer in Wichita. Silas had sold what little he had left to pay debts and fines. He was leaving Ford County. Some said he was headed south. Others said west. No one cared much where. Clara stood by the fence again, the same place she had once watched for dust rising in fear. Now she watched cattle move slow across the field, and she felt the wind in her hair. "I used to count the marks," she said softly to Eli. "Every day. I thought that was my life." Eli leaned against the post beside her. The old wooden post from the broken stall now stood near the barn, brought there as firewood, but never burned. The 3 carved lines were still visible. "You don't have to count anymore," he said. Clara walked over to the post. She ran her fingers over the cuts. Then she picked up a hammer resting on a barrel nearby. Without hesitation, she struck the post once, twice, 3 times. The wood split down the middle. The marks were gone. That evening, as the sky turned gold and then deep blue, Clara sat on the porch steps. She did not stiffen. She did not brace for pain. She breathed. Eli sat a few feet away, giving her space but not leaving. You didn't have to help me," she said after a long silence. "Yes, I did," he answered. She looked at him. "Why?" Eli thought about that summer afternoon in the stable, about the chain, about the way she had not cried. "Because I stayed quiet once before," he said, "and I won't do that again." The wind moved through the tall grass. Crickets began to sing. Clara smiled, small but real. 3 times a day, she said softly. That's how often he tried to break me. She looked out at the open land. But it only took once for someone to stand between us. The ranch lights glowed warm against the dark. No dust rose on the road. No rider watched from the shadows. The clock that had once ruled her life was gone. Not because time changed, but because fear did.